Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. We're looking forward to talking with Jack Goldstein, who is going to be entering his freshman year at the University of Pennsylvania. Jack is planning on being a political science major and excited to talk a little bit about your journey, how you ended up at the University of Pennsylvania, learn a little bit more about your application process, and learn a little bit more about your high school activities as well. So thanks, Jack, for joining us. Excited to get started.
Absolutely.
Cool. So let's start just by talking a little bit. Give me a little bit of background on your high school. What kind of school did you go to? Your region. Talk to me a little bit about that, and then we'll jump into sort of more of the journey.
Yeah, so I am from Portland, Oregon, so anybody Pacific Northwest. I'm right in that backyard. I go to a Catholic high school. I would call it mid-sized. It's I think about 320 people in my graduating class. It's considered a college preparatory school, so we definitely send a lot of kids to high-tier institutions. But then there's also the large population that goes to the University of Oregon or goes to just a state school or goes to a lot of the Catholic schools on the West Coast. A lot of kids end up going to California schools, rather that's like UC or LMU is super popular, Cal Poly. So a lot of people stay in the West Coast, but of the people who sort of go off into the East, a lot of people do settle at very high tier institutions.
Cool. And so when you were starting, let's kind of jump into the college search process, just because
Yep.
you had said most people are staying sort of in that region. For you, when you're starting to look at colleges, like did you want to get out of that region? Were you looking primarily in other areas? Like what was the driving force behind like looking on the East Coast in general?
Yeah, so if I'm being 100% honest with you, when I first started looking at colleges, all I really was looking at was how good was the football team and how big of a party atmosphere was it. And I was really just lost in that process and I didn't really know what to look for. I didn't know what I wanted to study. So the one thing that I did know was a football team.
Hmm.
And so then I started to see that, okay, it's like all these like SEC schools in the South. And so then I sort of thought like, okay, I want to be in warm weather. Like that's going to be a pretty contributing factor. And that's sort of where I found my first sort of dream school, which was Tulane, which is sort of the combination between a great party atmosphere, a great football team, and warm weather and far away from home.
Hmm. And so when you find Tulane and you start navigating that, to spoiler alert, you end up at the University of Pennsylvania, which is not necessarily known for its football team and party atmosphere and things like that.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about what did that sort of transition look like? So you're looking at Tulane, you're excited about that, and then how does it kind of gravitate to the University of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so it honestly really started with conversations with my grandparents and conversations with my parents about both what I wanted with my education and what they wanted for education. And coming from a Jewish household, education is of paramount importance. We are the people of the book, and they said, why not go for the moon? Like, Tulane is an incredibly hard school to get into. If you think that you're competitive at Tulane, you can apply somewhere crazy, and the worst they say is no.
Sure.
And so that's when I really started doing research into top tier institutions like the University of Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
where for any student, no matter your GPA, no matter your SAT, it's considered a reach school.
Totally.
And so my family was just like, go for it. There's no downside. The worst they say is no. And so that's when I started looking into schools like UPenn. And the more that I read about it, the more that I fell in love with it.
Cool. And what were some of the things that you felt like changed your perspective or made you fall in love with the school? Because I think one of the things that happens a lot of times for students, they start off really similar to where you were, which is either, I want a large football team, I want kind of that rah-rah component, or they're looking purely at prestige of the school. So tell me a little bit about from like a programmatic standpoint, what was it that you looked at that you were like, oh, this is really cool. This is something I'm interested in, and that kind of changed what your mindset was.
So, for a little bit of context, I'm a complete history nerd, and I love sort of that American Revolution, that whole colonization phase in our country. And I've always been a really big fan of Benjamin Franklin. For whatever reason, I've always loved him because he wasn't somebody who was just a diplomat or he wasn't just a scientist. He did everything. And when I learned that the University of Pennsylvania was founded by him and his ideals, and specifically that the College of Arts and Sciences wants to cultivate kids that are going to be as well rounded as he is, Obviously, that's a very tough task to accomplish, but their goal is to push people to be more multifaceted and to study what they desire rather than just chasing a diploma and just taking classes for their major. They really want to cultivate that well-rounded student, and that's what I think is something that I do very well, is just my well-roundedness as a student. When I visited the University of Pennsylvania, something that they said in their info session that I haven't heard at any other school was, we will not accept you if you're a brain on a stick. We want to see a well-rounded, holistic individual, and we're going to look at you holistically. And so that's when I sort of realized, okay, I might have a shot here because no, I'm not a brain on the stick. No, I don't have the perfect SAT or the extremely high GPA, but I felt like I had a relatively well-rounded application. And so that's when I realized A, I might have a shot, and B, this would be a great fit for me to be able to explore my many, many academic curiosities.
So I love that because I think nowadays, and I hear this a lot at conferences that I go to, and when you talk to other, like you'll see things online with like from other college counselors and things of like, you need to have big spikes in your areas of interest, and you need to only focus on X, Y, and Z. And I am not a believer in that at all. I think you certainly want to demonstrate like intellectual curiosity and a pursuit of things that you're interested in, but I don't believe at all that those things all always need to be in alignment because you're 16, 17, 18 years old. Like, who knows what you want to do? And the
Right.
reality is, most kids end up switching their major or coming in undecided at some point in college. So this idea that you need to have everything figured out at a young age is just like not accurate in my from my perspective. And so to hear you say that, I think is important. So let's talk a little bit about what those extracurriculars are. What is like when you say you're well rounded? Talk to me a little bit about the things that you were doing that were from an academic standpoint that you felt like were really important pillars of your application. From an extracurricular standpoint, like what did that all look like for you?
So starting freshman year, I didn't test well when I got into Jesuit high school. I tested into basically the baseline math class. I was taking Algebra 1 my freshman year. I wasn't really taking many honors courses either. The one thing I really had going for me was that I was fluent in Spanish, so I was able to take sort of the heritage bilingual class. And so that's something that I think sort of set me apart when I was, in lower grades. But other than that, I was in all baseline classes. And because I was in baseline classes, I realized that I wasn't really getting challenged enough in the classroom. And so I started getting involved outside of the classroom. I was a three-sport athlete. I competed in ski racing at a very high level. Um, I junior year, once I started taking harder classes, but I was already sort of into mock trial because it's just I had so much free time my first 2 years in high school. I wanted to get involved with the school outside of the classroom because inside of the classroom, I always loved school and I just wasn't getting the rigor that I wanted.
So let's go back to the fluent in Spanish components of things because I'd like to hear a little bit more about like what got you to that stage to begin with. But I also think that this is something for students to get a better understanding of, regardless of what field of interest they may have. Oftentimes, I'll get students who will either stop taking a language at a particular time because they've met their school's requirement, or they'll get to AP Spanish as a junior and then stop. And the thing with that is like that's an advantage that you have. And so if you then just leave it alone and that doesn't enhance or grow over time, then you lose that advantage because other kids are going to get to that AP level. So from your perspective and with your experience, like tell me a little bit about like if you're coming into to high school fluent in Spanish, like how'd you get to that point? But then also how does that still become like a big part of your academic story as you enter high school?
Yeah, so I went to a Spanish immersion school for elementary school. So K through 5 was taught almost entirely in Spanish. That's why I think some of my English skills were lacking during middle school, is just because I learned how to read in Spanish, I learned how to write in Spanish, I learned my history in Spanish. Like it wasn't until like seventh or eighth grade until like I learned his name was Christopher Columbus and not Cristobal Colon. Like it's just like
My
stuff like
My kids are in a Spanish immersion class too, and they always, and I don't speak Spanish at all, and they will always, they have like the Spanish accent for a lot of the names and things, and I think it's so cool. So they were like, "No, Dad, you're saying it wrong. That's not how you say it." So
right.
100% true. Yeah.
So, just like I learned everything in Spanish, and I think that made me a really, really strong student going forward because it taught me from a young age that I can do hard things. Like it's
Yeah.
not an easy task to learn Spanish, especially when nobody in your family speaks Spanish at all. And so coming into high school and sort of having the upper hand on people, because I was in this bilingual class for bilingual students, many of which spoke Spanish at home. I think all of which spoke Spanish at home.
Yeah.
And so having that experience from a super young age and just being so comfortable with this language, and while a bunch of my buddies were in Spanish 1, Spanish 2, maybe the really advanced ones were in Spanish 3, and they were still A, really struggling with that class, and B, I just sort of saw like, okay, like I really have an advantage in this field.
You see?
Like, let's go optimize on this. And so a few years later, I take the AP Spanish class. A bunch of people were struggling through, and I never saw a real challenge with it just because of something that I was gifted at such a
Yeah.
young age. I mean,
And
Spanish is a gift.
did you do so you take the AP Spanish and then how do you kind of like maintain your involvement in the language and your level of comfort with the language as you go through high school?
Yeah, so I took AP Spanish my junior year. In senior year, there was actually an option to take another year of Spanish, but since I wanted to take a bunch of AP history classes, I didn't end up taking it.
Hmm.
But I'm super fortunate. My family, we travel to South America, we travel to Mexico, and so I'm able to practice it in the streets there. And you just feel so great, like having perfect Spanish. Like everybody's just looking at you like you're crazy. They're like,
Yeah, yeah.
how are you doing this? Like, and I'm just like, I've been
That-
taking it in school
That's what I
for
do. Yeah, yeah.
13 years, and I guess that's what happens. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. So, okay, so that's obviously a big piece for you. You're a three-sport athlete. You're involved in athletics. When you think about like the activity or activities that you're most proud of, or maybe most involved with, like what would you point to for those?
In school, mock trial, certainly mock
Okay.
trial.
Yep. What about outside of school? Are there other things that you felt like you were doing outside of that context that were like important kind of pieces of your puzzle overall?
Yeah, so I believe that my research project that I conducted the summer going into junior year played
Hmm.
a really integral part of my college application. A, because it gave me purpose, it gave me direction, it gave me a lot of knowledge on the back end
Yep.
of things. But it just really fueled my fire and energized me to being like, okay, I'm confident that I want to study political science. I'm confident that I want to keep pushing for this cause. So it really gave me a lot of purpose and a lot of direction. And then also it was a really great experience. Like not many people get that experience of conducting a research project
Sure.
in high school. And for me, one that hit so close to home. So it was just a really, really special experience.
So let's dive into that a little bit. So talk to me a little bit about the project, like what did you kind of what did you get into? How did you conceptualize it? Did you work with somebody? Like walk me through that journey.
Yeah, so I was like assigned a research mentor, and
By
she
your high
was
school?
no, this was through it's called Polygents.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was a research project through Polygents. I was given a research mentor, and I knew that I wanted to do something with anti-Semitism
Hmm.
and contemporary. I didn't want to do, the history of anti-Semitism, like that stuff that leave that to historians. Like I
Sure.
was really focused on contemporary historians. This was like right when all the stuff like with Kanye West on Twitter was going crazy, and I mean, you just saw it rampantly, just like a wildfire going
Yeah.
through social media. And so then I really realized, okay, let's do like focus on anti-Semitism in social media.
Sure.
And then my mentor was like, we got to go tighter than that. And I'm like, okay, like let's make this hit close to home, like anti-Semitism on social media with high school students.
Hmm.
Um, and so we ended up to make it very, very specific to high school students in Portland, Oregon. And so we ended up, so as sort of a context, I just studied and I took notes on, and I made just like a PowerPoint on just like the history of anti-Semitism, where it comes from, what the word means, all of that sort of background information. And then also just like different statistics about like, I don't know if like most people know this, but Kanye West has more followers on Instagram than there are Jews in the world. And so when he posts
That's
something like
crazy.
that,
Yeah.
when he posts something like that, that has a bigger impact than if every single Jew around America spoke out about it.
Sure, sure.
So
Yeah.
something that seems so it just doesn't seem like it's going to have a real impact.
Yep.
It does.
Yep.
And then we also conducted surveys on people around Portland, just saying like, do you think that anti-Semitism is a real issue? Like, would you consider like this to be anti-Semitic? And I mean, the results were very surprising.
Really.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, tell me about like what does the end result look like for you? Because I think a lot of times families, if they or students, if they want to engage in research, they feel like it has to have like some kind of accolade tied to it. I'm not a believer in that. I think that the pursuit of research, like there are students who are going into doctoral programs that haven't published papers or anything like that. And certainly very rarely, extraordinarily rarely, is there going to be a high school paper that's like, going into the Harvard Medical Journal or something like a high level academic journal. So tell me a little bit about from an end result standpoint, like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so to sort of build a network of people who might be interested in hearing what I have to say, I sort of told my story with anti-Semitism at a Jewish Federation of Greater Portland event. And it was an event for Jewish educators, whether it be teachers or people whose jobs is to go to schools and teach about anti-Semitism, whether it's people who are working at the Anti-Defamation League, just educators in the Jewish community. I sort of told my story about anti-Semitism, and then at the end, I was like, "And this fueled something really special. This fueled a research project, and I'm going to be done with it in a couple of months. Like, I'd love to get your emails. I'm going to put a video together." So it ended up being like a PowerPoint that I talked over in video form. I used Jesuit Media. They helped me sort of finalize and edit. Jesuit Media is like the media production at my school. They were able to help me out and help me get a pretty strong end result.
I love that. This is a very important part because I think that there's this idea that people have of like I need this accolade, I need to win this award, I need to be recognized for something. That's not the way that a college application works at
Yep.
all. When you're applying to college, we rarely submit a resume. It's very rare that a school even allows you to submit a resume. There's an activity list, and in the activity list, you have 10 activities that you can talk about, but you get 150 characters to describe them. So from an admission perspective, I'm going to spend probably like 70 seconds looking at an activity list. It's just really more to give me a gauge of like what's happening, what the student's been involved with, those kinds of things. Where we spend the bulk of the time is going to be on your short answer and extended essays. And so the extended essays is not about I won this award or I was published in this journal. It's about the narrative that you create. So let's say for sake of argument, you had done this research and then you submitted it to a journal. Your narrative then becomes I did this research where I surveyed people within the region. I gained an understanding of anti-Semitism in my local community, and then I submitted it for publication. Okay, that's good. I have no problem with that. But your narrative becomes I did all of this research to understand anti-Semitism within my community. Then I brought it to this board. I did a presentation. I put together a Q&A. I responded to these people. I then established a network. That has way more depth than somebody who submitted something for a publication at a high school journal. So it's a long-winded way of saying like focus less on the accolade and focus more on the narrative and the depth at which you're pursuing something. And then you're going to have these unique stories that you're able to tell within the application. So I love that.
Yeah, that's spot on.
Um, so tell me a little bit about let's get into your personal statement a bit, right? And then we'll get back into like the strategy of applications and stuff because your personal statement aligns a lot with some of the things that you're talking about with the research work that you've done. However, your personal statement, you talk a lot about like your own sort of struggle with your relationship as a Jewish person of like what does this look like? And I would imagine that's also a component like you're going to a Catholic high school. There's not a lot of Jewish students there. So talk to me a little bit about your personal statement, which was um, very vulnerable, very honest, and it's one of those things that not everyone's going to have this exact story, but the goal of the personal statement should be to get the person who's reading it to be rooting for you. and you do a really good job of saying like, here, this is what it is. Like, this is how I felt. I was struggling with my own identity. And here's what it took to understand a little bit more of who I am, and I'm going to continue to grow. So talk to me a little bit about the essay as you submitted it, and then we'll backtrack and talk a little bit about like how you got to that point.
Yeah. So when I submitted my essay, I knew that I had a really good story to tell. Not everybody has that. I don't want to call it as eye-opening of an experience. Like obviously everybody experiences their different types of adversity, but when you have like your family being threatened, when you have people outside of your house and you don't know who they are, and you can write a hook about that. I mean, it would be wrong to not keep reading. And so I knew that I had the advantage of, okay, it's an eye catcher. That hook
And
is an eye catcher.
can you talk a little bit about that hook, just so listeners can understand a little bit about like what that was, how that was shaped?
Yeah. So for context, in seventh grade, um, my mom was the president of the Jewish Federation for Portland. And so our family's name and address and whatnot was circulating in some dark web anti-Semitic chains. And for whatever reason, some people, since I was a young, dumb seventh grader who didn't know social media safety, they added me on Snapchat, and I just added them right back. I was like, okay, maybe it's
Sure.
somebody I know, maybe it's not. And all of a sudden, I get added to a group chat, and they're sending very, very malicious text. They're sending pictures of my house. They're sending pictures of my address, pictures of me, pictures of my mom, pictures of my family. And then one text that I do really remember is that they said that like they're gonna come throw rocks at our windows and gas our house. And so that's very, historically charged. It's very rhetorically charged. And so that's, I think, why I remember it so well is that specific text.
Mhm.
And so that was just sort of a moment when I realized, okay, Jewish people aren't, what we make ourselves out to be in Temple. Like we are, like we feel pride, we feel proud, but when stuff like that happens, it's a real punch in your gut because you realize, like, in seventh grade, I've never had that experience before in my life. Like, you can read about it in the classroom, you can learn about the Holocaust, but you can't experience it firsthand until something like that actually happens to you. And
And
so I
so,
was just,
yeah.
yeah.
So then, in your essay, you do a really good, a really. I mean, it's very honest and straightforward. But then you talk a lot about that. Like, okay, this is a moment where like I kind of want to remove myself from this context a little bit, which is totally understandable for as a child to like. I want to step away from this fear and conflict, and so like maybe I don't want to identify with this part of my life, this part of my identity. And then it's sort of like this progression of getting you back into embracing that part of your identity. So talk a little bit about the from the narrative standpoint of like, okay, you start to re-embrace it a little bit, and then it really kind of takes shape as the research happens and things like that. So kind of walk us through the rest of that.
Yeah, so after that happened, there's no better way to put it other than I was scared. And it was less than obviously my identity was at stake, but I was genuinely concerned for my well-being and my safety. And I didn't know how else to think other than if I separate myself from this thing that brought me harm, I'll probably be fine. And I didn't really realize how important the Jewish community was to me until I sort of rekindled my relationship with it.
Hmm. Makes sense. Were you, because I get questions a lot from students and families, were you ever concerned about how an admission officer would perceive such a heavy topic? Was there a concern of like maybe, you just had mentioned like the Kanye West thing, like was there a thought process of like, well, maybe this is too heavy to talk about in my application. Did that ever cross your mind at all?
It did, but I think I have a really good answer to this question. A lot of the schools that I was applying to had really, really bad incidents with anti Semitism on campus the year before.
Hmm.
And I think that it's a topic that my thought process is yes, I was writing my personal statement for every school, but let's just talk about Penn in particular.
Sure.
Penn lost their president over this issue. Penn had a lot of Jewish students really, really angry with the school. A lot of the alumni at Penn, the Jewish alumni, were super, super upset with how the directors handled all these situations. And so deep down, I sort of knew like, okay, like they're gonna want to accept a kid who has firsthand experience facing anti-Semitism, and as you get further down in the essay, someone who riz up from anti-Semitism,
Mhm.
because hopefully they can sort of do that same fix at our school.
Yep.
And so, yes, it's a very, very heavy issue, but at a lot of my top schools, there was big issues with anti-Semitism on campus. So I knew that although it's a very charged issue, that it's something that they sort of want to see from their students
Yeah.
because it's something that directly happened to them on their campus.
Yeah, I get this conversation and these concerns from students all the time as far as like what are we is this too heavy of a topic or whatever. And my response always is it's pretty rare where I'm going to look at a topic and be like, I think this is too heavy for the college application process, especially if it's honest and vulnerable and like that's your truth and the
Mhm.
life that you lived. Um, so I would look at it more as like if somebody's going to read my truth and be like, I don't think this belongs here, then you probably don't want to be there anyway. So I mean, I think it's important as long as you're comfortable talking about those things. This is context that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so if for sake of argument, left that part of the story out and the challenges that you faced and how you overcame them, and like your own perception of your identity and things like that, then that's context that's just like literally not there in the application, and that's a big part of your life. So I would think about it more as like, what are the things that I want to make sure an admission officer understands about me, and make sure that those things are in the application. Like, what are those two or three things, whether it's your identity, an experience that you have, an attribute that you think is really important, and those should be the catalysts of the rest of the application. I think you do a really good job in talking about that. um, so talk to us about like what advice you would give other. Well, let's go back to that to the story for a second before we get into it. So let's talk about kind of like the reclamation or like the rehabilitation of your identity, your Jewish identity, and then like what do you do with it? So it's not just that, okay, now I feel reconnected to my Jewish identity. You do stuff with it. So talk a little bit about what you do at that point.
Yeah, so I realized that this was something that mattered to me, and so yeah, I did the research project on it. And then in sort of that same time frame, October 7th occurred, and that was a very, very tough time for the Jewish community. And so it really just became sort of just joining the fight against anti-Semitism, whether that's on the big scale, like talking to people about your research project and discussing it with, Jewish educators, or just informing your classmates about it, or talking in a class about the issue, presenting on it at school, like just stuff like that, where it's just raising advocacy and just joining the fight against it, because it's one of those things that you don't really learn about
Hmm.
until you're taught it from my experience from a Jewish person,
Yep.
especially from a Catholic school. It doesn't come up all that often, and it's sort of taboo.
Yep.
And so to sort of be that bridge between the Jewish community and people who wouldn't know otherwise, that's sort of how I got in. So just joining the fight against anti-Semitism was really
and
how
and and being able to do it within your community too, right? So talk a little bit about like kind of the work that you're doing with the city and that side of things too, because I think that's a big part of this is that it's not just I did a research paper. It's like I did this research paper and then I elevated. So if your story is consistently trying to raise the bar. And I think
Mhm.
that's what the key is it's not, I don't need a student to go 0 to 100. And a lot of times students and families will say things like, what do I need to do to get into Penn? And it just doesn't work like that. What you need to do is you need to have things that you're interested in, and you need to demonstrate growth and progression within those. And so you do that pretty well throughout. But talk about like the work that you did with the city as well.
Yeah. So my big thing is just advocacy, and that's what I did for Jewish people. And then I came to the city of Portland, and I was just sort of told like, we have a couple different things you could be working on. What do you want to do? And they said Major League Baseball, and my ears shot up. I'm like, I'm a huge sports person. Like, let's get involved with this. Like MLB to Portland, let's go. Like that's awesome. And the more I got into it, the more I realized, okay, yeah, this is about sports, but it's really about restoring communities and making sure that like we're going to be doing the best practices to make sure that we don't, you know, mess up neighborhoods, or to make sure that we can raise revenues for the city to make other people's lives better. So it was just really about bettering people's lives, making the people, the community of Portland a better place.
Hmm.
And it was just super heartwarming to be a part of it, because for me, I got to be involved with a super cool project that was top secret at the time. And I mean, it's involved with sports, which I love, but at the end of the day, it wasn't about sports. It was just about making people happy. I mean, sports bring people together. And so that was just a really, really cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, that's great. So let's transition a little bit and talk a little bit about the application process. So you get to a point, we talked earlier about kind of getting to a point where you had moved away from like more of the like rah rah big football school type of a place, and you land on, okay, I'm really interested in Penn. What was it from a strategic standpoint? Did you think at all about like the early decision process? Did you think about, were there other schools that were like highly selective schools that you were anticipating applying to? Like, what was kind of your mindset as you begin thinking about that strategy?
Yeah, so early decision was something that I learned about super early on in the process. And I think for a lot of people who don't early decision, the issue is they just didn't really know about it soon enough, and so weren't sort of mentally ready to commit to a school. But since I was sort of so on board, like since Tulane was my first reach school, and that school is like ED all day. If you think that you want to go to Tulane, if you ED, you got a pretty good shot. And so ED was sort of something that I was very mentally prepared for. And once I sort of was talking with my family, and they're like, "Let's shoot for the moon." I'm like, "Okay, like let's shoot for the moon and let's give me a good shot." So I knew that I was able to commit to an early decision,
Mhm.
and that's what I went with, was just ED, lock it in.
Yeah, for context, Tulane's early decision acceptance rate for the class of 2028 was about 68%. So I
Yeah.
mean, they're taking the vast majority of students during that ED. Did you think about, from a strategic standpoint, if you had not been admitted to UPenn, would you have done an ED2 to Tulane?
So I actually applied EA to Tulane,
Okay.
and their acceptance came out, I think, the same day or the day after.
Okay.
And so I heard back from there as well, and I would not have had to ED too.
Yeah.
I was not expecting to get into Tulane, um, but because I was at the time really, really, really interested in Syracuse. They had a really cool program between Maxwell and Newhouse, which is their school of public policy and their school of communications. And I mean, it's a super, super cool selective program that they
Yeah.
have. And so I was like really like talking like I think I want to ED2 to Syracuse.
Sure.
I was just in love with the school. I visited it. Like it was just, it seemed like a perfect fit. So I was ready to commit to Syracuse had I not gotten into Penn.
And I love that because, and this is something I talk about a lot on like my Instagram channel and stuff. We talk a lot about on YouTube channel. We talk a lot about the idea of like programs, right? So I think families get really hung up on prestige and their perception of a school. But if you ask them, like I often sort of like, uh, maybe to be like an asshole a little bit, will be like, if you love whatever University of Pennsylvania, I'll say, who is your favorite professor at the University of Pennsylvania? I don't
I,
think I've ever
right,
gotten an answer. And so
absolutely.
the point is more like, you have this idea of this school, but you don't even necessarily know what's going on. What you're talking about is, I've got this school that I'm really excited about and here, and you articulated a lot of the reasons why earlier. But then also, if that doesn't work out, I've got a school that I feel like pretty confident I can be admitted to ED, and I love this program.
Hmm.
Like that's a great place to be. Whereas a lot of kids really strain themselves on, I've got to get into the most competitive college, and if I don't get into this place ED, I've got to do this ED2, and it's just this like, I mean, it's got to be wildly tumultuous to kind of endure all of those things. And so I think that the correct way to do it is to have an understanding of like, look, I'm gonna shoot for a school that I feel like is a reach or maybe even a far reach, but I want to give myself a shot. And I've got a bunch of other schools that I feel really comfortable with that I feel like I'm gonna be admitted to. What a lot of kids end up doing is they'll apply to schools that they're more likely to be admitted to, but then if they don't get into their reach schools, they're like, I don't want to go to these schools. Well, then
Right.
why'd you apply to them? So it's we've got to get it to a point where you have schools that you're interested in, excited about, and you understand the programs, because that is the key. I call it the sweatshirt problem, which basically is kids care a lot about the sweatshirt that they're going to wear around their high school for the like 2 or 3 months after they find out that they've been admitted somewhere, of like where they're going to go. So like, I'm going to wear this sweatshirt and my friends are going to be really impressed with me. The problem with that is 3 months later, you're going to be out of that school and you're going to go to a whatever school, and everyone's going to be wearing the same sweatshirt because they're all going to that school. So I think it's really important for you to understand the programs that are available and what you're interested in, as opposed to simply what does that prestige look like.
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah,
that's
because I mean, there's a huge step down, like in terms of acceptance rate, like from Penn to Syracuse. But the more I learned about this, like Syracuse, the more I loved it. And say I don't love Penn, like I know exactly where I'm transferring if I can get in. Like Syracuse, like I really just like fell in love with the school.
yeah,
I think it was just a little too late along in the process.
totally, totally. What do you feel like are obviously, you're going to be going to college in the fall, so you haven't started this process yet. But what do you feel like are a lot of, or maybe some of the skills that you've learned, whether it's through the research work that you did, the work with the city of Portland? What do you feel like are some of the skills that you're going to be able to take to college, that have been impacted by this process overall?
Yeah, the first thing is you can do hard things. I never thought that I would be able to function off of 3 hours of sleep for a couple of weeks. Like just writing those essays on top of school, on top of mock trial. Like we were headed to Chicago for a national competition a week after the EA deadline. And I mean, it was a lot of work. And I kept waking up every morning and I was excited for the day because I had so much going on.
Yeah.
So if you're really passionate about what you're doing, you're going to be able to do it just fine. Like if you're excited about the school, the essay is going to be easy. Like let the essays write themselves. Like if you really love the school, like if you feel like, oh, I don't want to be writing this essay, like it might not be the right school for you. So
Yep.
just like you can do hard things if you like if it is the right thing and you love it,
Hmm.
like it'll come easily. The next thing with just time management, I mean, get a calendar, write everything down, keep track of everything, even if it's just homework. Just say, I'm going to do homework from 7 to 9, put it on your calendar, because that way, if you're on your phone scrolling on Instagram Reels and you get that notification saying it's 7 o'clock, do your homework, you might not do it right at 7 o'clock, but you're at least subconsciously going to feel a little bit guilty of like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I should be doing homework right now. And also just keeping track of meetings and all the extracurriculars. Like I was definitely a doer in high school. I always had a lot going on. And so if I didn't keep track of everything, I would have gotten lost.
And I think that that's a big, I get this point all the time, is like time management is so important. So we're recording, we are, if I could speak, we are recording this at the end of June. So if you are a senior, right, you're going into your senior year, take advantage of the time. You still have time, right? So like start writing those essays, fill out the Common App, get your activity list in order. Even if the supplementals are not being released from schools for the next couple of weeks, like get your ducks in a row, develop some content. And I think that the reality is, because I hear this all the time, it's like, oh, I can't start because I don't know the supplements that are going to be asked. They're all essentially the exact same thing. So, I mean, basically, like the vast majority of these schools are asking essentially the same types of supplements. Like, what's a community that you're a part of? How have you demonstrated leadership? How have you been innovative? How have you pursued your academic interests? So you can start developing that content. And I think that's a really important part of it. Um,
Yeah.
I want to get into kind of what you're doing now and like next steps. But before we get into that, what would be like one piece of advice that you could give somebody who's maybe entering this process, or maybe even like to your younger self as you're in, grade 8, grade 9? Like what would be a piece of advice that you might give somebody at those stages?
Yeah, this sounds super cliche, but keep an open mind. If you would have told me freshman year I was going to be studying political science at the University of Pennsylvania, I would have laughed at you. I
Hmm.
thought that I was going to be a three sport athlete for all of high school. I thought that I was probably going to end up at the University of Oregon just like my dad. And I never really expected to fall in love with school. I never expected to fall in love with mock trial. And just so many things surprised me. And I'm so fortunate that I sort of took the risks to leave my comfort zone and to try these new things because I mean, I ended up making a lot of my best friends through it. I ended up meeting a lot of the great mentors that I have through these extracurriculars, like my mock trial coaches, my mock trial teammates. These are all like people that really mean the world to me, and I would not be the person who I am without them. So just keep an open mind, like say yes to everything. The worst you can do is you realize you don't like it and you say no later on. But turning
Yep.
down an opportunity, it's never a good idea. Like like yes, you're gonna be a little overwhelmed, but just if you love it, as I said before, you're gonna be fine. And if you don't love it, let go of it, drop it. Like if it doesn't mean something to you, it shouldn't be in your college application either way. Like doing stuff just to put on your activities list, it doesn't work because when you only have 150 characters, you're not going to be able to get an authentic version of why you did it, what you did. It's going to feel forced.
Totally. I think one of the things that I would say, especially to younger kids, is like the develop skills in those grades 9 and 10. And then you can have these types of experiences that you can leverage those skills. And you do a great job within your application of demonstrating these types of things. Like, have these skills related to language, related to culture, related to people, communication. Those by themselves are probably not going to be like pillars of your application, but then you take that, then you develop them into the things that you're interested in. And I think that the important thing for people to think about here is like that well-rounded component to your application is important, and that is a doable thing. You can be admitted to highly selected colleges as a well-rounded applicant. Do you need to have things that are elite within your profile comparatively to your peers, just like you have with the research work and the work you did with the city? Of course you do, but those things don't always necessarily need to align directly with what you think you may want to study, or a career path, or anything like that. And so I think that that's a great example. I do want to talk, Jack, before we leave, about some of the things you're doing right now, because you've got a couple of cool projects. Obviously, you're going to be going to the University of Pennsylvania, which is exciting in and of itself. But talk a little bit about your other project that you've kind of launched through this college search process.
Yeah, so about a month ago from today, I think it might actually be exactly a month ago from today, my brother, I, and my dad, we started a company called Quadzio. And what Quadzio does is it connects high school students with alumni from their high school who are at colleges that they want to visit. And rather than flying across the country to visit a school and be paired with a tour guide who is in a completely unrelated major from another part of the country, you're going to be paired with a student from your high school or somebody who is in your major or has common interests. And so it's going to make the college visiting process so much better, so much more efficient. And we're super excited for next year to see how it all goes.
Cool. And you guys have grown pretty quickly right off the bat. I think it's an awesome concept. It's super exciting to see sort of a change in the college tour and the college search process, to be able to get students connected with other students, especially related to their areas of focus. So I think it's a great idea, and I'm excited to see that take off. Well, thanks so much, Jack, for taking the time. Appreciate you talking through this process. Obviously, you were extremely successful in the process. You didn't necessarily read a guide and do everything that is being told online. Here's the key. There is no secret to college admissions. That is not a thing. So go make sure that you're doing the things that are of importance to you, that you are pursuing things in a way that makes you your own unique entity. Don't mirror other people, and you will find success in this process. So thanks again, Jack, for taking the time, and look forward to receiving many comments that we can follow back on over the next couple days.
Absolutely. It's been great.
Thanks, Jack.
Yep. Bye bye.